My name is Caoimhín Gaffney. I'm an artist and filmmaker. I work in photography, film. I also do a lot of writing for scripts and text pieces. I applied to the residency at ArtLinks because this project is very much about nature and the environment and a relationship to it. And it actually, part of the start of the project began when I was shooting some medium format photography on the Inishowen Peninsula a few years ago. And I always wanted to come back and spend like a longer concentrated period here with the landscape, which is quite dramatic and varied. So I had my eye on ArtLinks for quite some time. And when I got the chance to come for the whole month, I decided like I can shoot photos and film and write, and it can be part of this much bigger project I'm working on. I shoot on medium format, which is analog film. It's like a completely manual camera, so it's a very slow process, which is quite a meditative way of shooting film. You have to be like completely aware of like any changes in lighting. Really, I don't want to do too much post-production on the scans. So I take my time. You have to focus and really let sort of the scene unfold, whether you're waiting for the sun to appear from the clouds or you're waiting for a gust of wind to come. It's a very kind of, it's almost like a very thoughtful way of working. You have to slow down. You only have, say, like 10 shots in the back of the camera. So you can't just have this excess of images. You have to be really careful. And in a way, it forces me to be more thoughtful with my framing and composition. Yeah, so I'm shooting a digital film, and it's going to be a 2-screen film, which is the first 2-screen film I've made. And in a way, I want the film and the photographs to like bounce off each other in an exhibition, to interrupt each other, to create moments of like tension, to kind of disrupt the narrative. I'm not really interested in the film having a narrative that goes from like beginning to end. I'm interested in it being almost like circular, almost like an internal feeling or an internal thought that often isn't logical or sequential. There can be this sort of like churning of emotions. The film gets into that churning, and then the images do something, the still images do something different. And then there's text pieces, and the text pieces, they kind of employ different voices. So some are observational, some are fictional, some are leaning more into prose and poetry. And that's doing something different to the script in the film as well. So there's a real, like, I'm trying to bring in a big plurality and have moments of tension and even like confusion undercutting each other. So there's not an overarching narrative. There's many different like sub-themes. This project is called All at Once Collapsing Together, and it explores this idea of needing nature to heal oneself or have a brief escape from yourself, while at the same time being very aware of climate change and then the resulting climate anxiety and climate grief. So it's trying to reconcile something that isn't reconcilable. It's trying to look into how important nature is to us and our identity. So the idea of the sounds that surround us every day, of like birds and insects, when they start getting less or they start becoming like at different times of the year than we expect, what does this do to our sense of self? So it's looking at how we interact with nature, how emotionally we respond to it. And I suppose part of it is very much coming from myself. So it's my own interaction with nature, the importance of nature to myself. And also looking at it in terms of how the state interacts with nature, how we've interacted with nature over time, and it's using time to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. But really, it's about our identity. Like, what does it mean to us if there's less grasshoppers in the fields? What does it mean to us if there's less birds migrating here or more birds migrating away at different times? What does that do to us, even if it's on a subconscious level? How is it affecting like our emotions and who we are? So very much it's dealing with the emotions of climate change and like interactions with nature, as opposed to maybe the science or the kind of fear. It's very much dealing with the importance of it to our identity. I completed my PhD in 2022 at Ulster University, and it was basically a queer filmmaking PhD, and a main part of it was how do we make the environment or protecting the environment be like a core pillar of queer values. So like, how do we make it a core part of like queer activism and even queer identity? So in my PhD film, I imagined this like fictional queer nation state, and the nation state decided that one of its main reasons for existing was that it would be a guardian of nature or a custodian of nature. But in the film, they're essentially a custodian of nature that is being destroyed. So I shot in this old quarry, like this kind of used up quarry in Wicklow. And actually in that whole area, there's still mines that are polluting the local rivers and the local streams. So there is a sort of an anger in the film as well that like, we're gonna protect this thing that's already being destroyed. And that's part of that film. It's called Expulsion, that I always come back to. And that's really where this project has kind of leapt from. It's taking that part and being, I suppose, delving into it further and for longer and in many different ways. I started making work even in my BA, and it essentially came from feeling like I didn't see voices like me in TV or radio or even in the newspaper. I felt like there was something about my experience that I felt like I wasn't seeing back. So a lot of my work is sharing an experience that I feel like I suppose I have a lot to say about the environment, and I have a lot to say about my emotional connection to the environment that I think is actually very relatable to a lot of people. And really, I want my work to reach as many people as possible. And it's not necessarily, I don't necessarily want everybody to like it. If some people have like a strong reaction against it, I think that can bring really interesting conversations. But I suppose even when I'm writing about these kind of more difficult subject matter, I'm always thinking like, if someone reads this for the first time or hears it for the first time, how is it landing for them? And you can't fully mediate that. There's a certain part where you put it out and it just does what it's doing and you can't control it. But I feel like I have something to share, and that's why that's my really like impulse in making this work. So this work came from this impulse of all these feelings. So it's a really like an expressive thing for me. It's like, obviously, like there's an intellectual engagement, there's research, there's writing, there's like kind of like the making a conceptual framework of an artwork. But a lot of my work has like an excess of emotions in it, like a real like outpouring of emotions, and sometimes like emotions that shouldn't be discussed or that are difficult to discuss. And now I'm sort of leaning into that. I think I've been a bit shy and I've been a bit trying to like put it in the middle of a film, so it kind of is this like interlude. And now I'm just like, what if the whole exhibition was an outpouring of excessive emotions? Like, what does that do and what does that mean? And I'm also using fiction as a way to share things, and also fiction as a way to discuss feelings that I don't even have. So I'm talking about, in one piece in the film, I'm writing from the perspective of the earth. What does the earth feel like? Not in a hippy-dippy way, but in a way of like, as something that's being extracted from and is slowly being kind of eaten into and eroded. What are those emotions? And I don't think they're comfortable emotions. So writing from outside of myself as well. I think part of the project is also grappling with our identity in relation to capitalism, and the idea that there's like a capitalist ecosystem that seems to need to be protected at all costs by nation states. And then there's like the environment, like our natural ecosystem, and that there's two, almost these two are not compatible as principles. Like you cannot have endless growth and endless extraction and a protected ecosystem. So part of the project is trying to almost break apart this like binary and say like, visualize what it means for the person to go back from the capitalist ecosystem into the environmental ecosystem. And David Abrams is a writer in America who writes a lot about, it's almost, and I'm gonna put words in his mouth that maybe aren't there, but it's about that, you know, we're all breathing in this like ecosystem, this sphere, we're all part of it, but we've been kind of removed from it. And how do we break down that remove and take a few steps back with the knowledge we have now? So he talks about like the more than human world, also the idea of that like shared breath between like us and trees. And the film, I'm in the film and the photos, I'm trying to visualize this like something that's almost like impossible to visualize, which is like, what does the figure in Ireland in a post-capitalist society, what is it, how are we interacting with nature? What does that look like? What are we doing? And in a way that's like also trying to visualize in a post-colonial way, this to rethink our relationship to nature, because I do think that Ireland's relationship to nature is essentially like a hangover from colonial times, just replicated through capitalism. It's like draining the bogs, cutting down the trees. We're just using it as a resource. We're not custodians of the island of Ireland. We're extracting from it. So the project's trying to visualize what a different way of interacting would be, and what a different way of interacting would feel like. Like, what would that feel like, and what would that do to us? Is it something positive? How would we integrate this new way of being with our identity and with our emotions? I think for me, the environment has always been this undercurrent in my practice, even from like early films in my BA. There's been this, it's kind of come to the forefront and then kind of fell back within films and different projects and within my writing. And I suppose part of that is feeling like I've just decided to bring it to the front as the main subject, because I feel like it's something I'm thinking about and like feeling all the time. So rather than trying to kind of fit that in a way that would fit into maybe a narrative, like instead of putting a fictional narrative over a film, which I've done in the past, and then using that as a way to discuss like a bigger truth or a bigger kind of historical issue, I've just decided to delve into it rather than shying away. So for me, I feel like it's always been there, and I'm just bringing it out now and giving it maybe the attention it deserves, which I feel like is what a lot of artists across the island are starting to be like. We think about this all the time. We're just going to start making a work about it, and people are doing it in so many different ways. And I feel like it's actually really important that we're engaging with it on an emotional level as well as an intellectual level, rather than just feeling kind of helpless or hopeless because of, you know, the kind of terrible statistics and the like pretty much like, I do feel like the news can make it feel like there's nothing we individually can do. I think like the visual arts, poetry, writing, they can all facilitate a space for the viewer or the reader or the listener to like engage or see themselves reflected back, or to discuss the impact on themselves that's doing something very different to, say, like a more like a doomism stories in the media, which are, you know, they're telling us the facts, but it can leave you pretty powerless. So I think the arts can really facilitate these regenerative conversations. Spending the months like in Inishowen and at Fort Dunree has really meant that I've been able to bring like the performers to like engage with me in a space that usually would be quite inaccessible or would be, you know, kind of financially prohibitive to get to and stay. But instead, you know, we went on a hike up to the Uris Lakes, and we were able to spend hours like filming and trying things out, and like go multiple times to a location. So we were shooting at Five Finger Strand. We shot like medium format and film, but instead of just turning up once with like a crew and having it be very a pressurized time, we were able to go and spend like long periods of time together working on things. So it's been in a way a very like nice, slow, quiet process, which is how I've been shooting the images without like the human figure in them. And I really wanted to take that way of working and do it with people rather than changing. So I think this sort of slow, constant engagement with a space, you know, it's a month, so it's not maybe that slow, but I feel like it makes sense with the project because it is about like observing and feeling. And, you know, I've been writing the script as I've been here. I've been writing the text pieces. And I feel like it's a real, as like a new way of working for me, rather than going to a location, there's 3 days, you have to get everything shot, everybody arrives at once. It's like if I shoot it myself, if I need help, like a friend or somebody does sound, like a sound recording for me, that we work on like a slower, more sustainable pace. And it also means that if, you know, a storm rolls in, that then we sit back and we do some like voiceover recording at home and we go out the next day. So it's trying to have it be the way of working to make sense with the project, but also to be cutting down on unnecessary like travel, unnecessary kind of waste. That a film set is like a very wasteful place, even with like food and energy. There's like, often it's like the more you spend, it's to keep everybody happy. Whereas this way I'm doing it in a way that it's like if I work with my peers and people who are, you know, we talk about these things all the time and then we come together and we collaborate, there is a sense of like a joining of minds that happens, which I really feel like the residency is facilitated, because otherwise I would not be able to access these remote locations. Like you couldn't do a 5-hour drive to like 6 hours or 5 hours of hiking and drive back. It would just be like the performer would be exhausted. So it's kind of facilitated like much more remote locations and a much like deeper engagement with the space. So I finished shooting this major part of the project at Fort Dunree and across the Inishowen Peninsula. And the next plan, the next stage of the project is to shoot another part of the film in County Cavan, which is supported by the Cavan Arts Office. So the project started in Northern Ireland. Now I've done this part in Donegal and then we're moving to Cavan. So I'm kind of moving all around Ulster shooting this film and photographs. The next stage will be for me to do all the post-production, the editing, the sound design, the color grading. And color grading is essentially like what you would do in the darkroom. So I like to have control over all the technical process because I get a lot of enjoyment from that. Eventually, once it's all ready, it's going to show at the Butler Gallery in Kilkenny, and I'll be working with the director and curator, Anna O'Sullivan. It's a very new way of working for me where all these parts of my practice, like the text, photographs and film, are shown in one installation. So we're going to be working on that together and it's going to open in June 2024.